What's happening in Yemen exactly? How did things reach this open and armed conflict between the Emirates and Saudi Arabia? Are we starting a new proxy war? Or will the confrontation this time be a direct one between the Emirates and Saudi Arabia? Yemen's situation is dangerous. If you want to know exactly what's happening, stay with us. Dear viewers, peace be upon you and God's mercy and blessings, and welcome to our renewed meeting today, God willing, from the series of opinion episodes. The topic of our episode today, dear viewers, it's somewhat different. It won't be about the Russian-Ukrainian war, nor about the American-Chinese conflict, nor about the Venezuela issue, nor about anything else. Because today we have a new development taking place in the Middle East, and specifically we will talk about Yemen. This military conflict has suddenly returned to Yemen in a very dangerous way, threatening the region and threatening two Arab countries today. Dear viewers, before we get into the details of what's happening today in Yemen, everyone should know how this conflict started. Everyone should know the history of Yemen so they can understand exactly what's happening today. This country, Yemen, has never really known unity throughout modern history. It was never a single state. This country has always been divided and has experienced very big conflicts. Conflicts that haven't ended to this day. If you turn on the news channels today or any media outlet and don't find any news about Yemen, know that there's only a truce. There's just a truce. It might last for weeks, maybe months, but ending the conflict has become impossible today for Yemen. If we talk about the 19th century, this country was divided into two parts. The southern part was under British occupation and the northern part was under Ottoman influence. The Ottoman Empire, so this situation continued for decades until the First World War came. During this war, the Ottoman Empire was defeated, so it withdrew its forces from Yemen. So here a new state was established in place of these northern territories, Yemen, which had been under Ottoman control. This state was called the Mutawakkilite Kingdom of Yemen, while southern Yemen remained under British occupation. So the situation remained divided like this. Then there was a revolution in the northern region of Yemen, a revolution against the Mutawakkilite Kingdom, which led to the collapse of this kingdom and the establishment of the Yemen Arab Republic. The situation remained divided like this between the north, the Yemen Arab Republic, and the south, which was under British occupation until 1967. In that year, South Yemen gained independence, just like most Arab and Islamic countries that gained their independence. During this period, the 1950s and 1960s, it was the time when the major powers, the colonial powers, were withdrawing from their colonies. Anyway, despite Britain's withdrawal, the situation there remained divided as well, because Britain's withdrawal led to the establishment of a state in the south, a state called the People's Democratic Republic of Yemen. So at that time, we had two states in Yemen, one in the south. This one adopted the socialist approach, meaning it was an ally of Russia, an ally of the Soviet Union, and another state in the north was, in one way or another, an ally of America. So the situation remained like this in Yemen, with endless wars between the north and the south throughout the 70s and 80s of the last century. Those in the south said Yemen should be unified under their leadership, and those in the north said the same thing, that Yemen should be unified under their leadership. So there were fierce wars. But the change that happened after that was that, with the beginning of the end of the 1980s, signs of the collapse of the Soviet Union began to appear. This affected the southern Yemeni state through military support, supplies, and so on. And this greatly contributed to the northern Yemeni forces reaching the capital of the south, Aden. And thus, the unification of the north and the south under one flag happened exactly in 1990. For the first time, the country was unified, and this took place with the rise of Ali Abdullah Saleh to power. So here, maybe for everyone, it seemed that this conflict was finally over. But as soon as 1994 came, just 3 or 4 years after this unification, the conflict returned again. Because the Yemenis in the north tried to control the south. The southern tribes and the resources there, this reignited the conflict. After that, the northerners also won and took control of the situation. So things stayed as I said, a truce. For years it was only a truce, since the south remained marginalized, suffering quietly and waiting for the right moment. It was always a ticking time bomb. Until 2011 came, the beginning of protests in all Arab and Islamic countries, what is called the Arab Spring. Here Yemen also entered into protests aimed at toppling the regime of Ali Abdullah Saleh. So what happened here? Ali Abdullah Saleh's regime actually fell, and the country entered a new conflict this time. This conflict was not just between the north and the south, nor was it between those supported by Russia and those supported by America, but rather between a group of competing forces. Many factions emerged and many countries appeared as well. Some were supported by Saudi Arabia, some by the United Arab Emirates, some by Qatar, some by Turkey, and some by Iran. Almost every country in the region either gained influence or tried to gain influence in Yemen. Among these factions, there was a small movement called the Believing Youth Movement. This movement turned into the Ansar Allah movement, which means the Houthis today. This movement was small and was active in Sada province. Then, in 2014, they seized the opportunity and took control of the capital, Sana'a, with significant and very clever support from Iran. So here, Arab countries like Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates decided to intervene militarily in Yemen. They said the situation was very dangerous. Iran began, or had already, taken control of Yemen. This means that Iran now has a direct border with Saudi Arabia and has come to control the Bab al-Mandab Strait. This is a serious matter for Saudi Arabia, which is why Saudi Arabia intervened militarily in Yemen and formed an Islamic coalition against the Houthis. It was made up of 11 countries, including the United Arab Emirates, Egypt, Jordan, Kuwait, Senegal, and also Morocco. Morocco was part of this coalition, but it withdrew in 2019. In addition to these countries, Qatar was also in this coalition, but it withdrew in 2017. And after it withdrew, it started supporting the Houthis. So that everyone knows, it's important to pay close attention to a very important point. Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates entered this war with a common goal, which was to expel Iranian influence from Yemen and to fight the Houthis in Yemen. This actually allowed them to control all the southern Yemeni territories and besiege the Houthis in the north. Honestly, if the coalition forces hadn't intervened, the Houthis would have controlled all of Yemen. But when will this war end? Will it end when the Houthi missiles and drones started to reach and target Saudi and Emirati territories? At first the attacks were limited, the impact was limited, and that was with short-range missiles. Then it started to shift to ballistic missiles and long-range drones. They strike Saudi Arabian energy facilities. And in the United Arab Emirates, it got to the point where there were threats that all of Dubai's towers would burn. If this aggression continued, then Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates realized that there was a very great danger threatening them. They decided to stop this military intervention, held meetings with Iran, and reconciled with Iran. They became completely convinced that today there is no way to fight the Houthis. The Houthis have become strong in the region. So dear viewers, I will show you this map that shows the control in Yemen. How is it now? So that everyone knows exactly what the situation is like in Yemen, then we will get into the topic or what is happening today in Yemen exactly. So pay attention, dear viewers. We see in green the areas controlled by the Houthis, which, as you can see, control a very important area, the capital Sana'a and the western coast of Yemen. The port of Al-Hudaydah is an area overlooking the Red Sea, and it's the area where they were targeting, cargo ships that are connected to Israel in support of the Palestinians in Gaza. This area shown in green, we can say today, has become the safest area now in Yemen, and it is the most densely populated area, and it is the area that has no known oil or gas wells, meaning it is a poor area. They only have an oil pipeline that transports oil to one of their ports, and they take their share from this production as fees for oil transportation and port services and so on. On the map, we also see in red the areas controlled by the internationally recognized Yemeni government, which is supported by Saudi Arabia. So if the green area is under Iranian influence, then the areas marked in red are under Saudi influence. What? At that time, it has the oil-rich city of Marib, and it has the city of Taiz. Then we also see areas in yellow and orange. We find the area controlled by what is called the Southern Transitional Council. It's almost the same territory as the historical South Yemen, which was also under British occupation. Today, this area is under Emirati influence, especially the area shown in orange, which receives a lot of support from the United Arab Emirates. This area is shown in orange and yellow. It wants to separate from Yemen. Its goal today is to achieve secession, meaning it wants the return of the South Yemeni state again. This area is rich in oil and gas, has oil refineries, and very important ports. At the same time, its population is small compared to other regions, which means it will be a wealthy area. The most important city in it is the capital of the region, which is Aden. It also has a very strategically important island, Socotra Island, which is now under the control of Emirati forces. So the Emirates have taken control of all these vast Yemeni coastlines, which have great strategic importance in the region, where there are very important ports under Emirati control. Then we also find a specific area marked in blue, a small area, but it is also very important because it directly overlooks the Bab al-Mandab Strait. This area is under the control of what is called the National Resistance Forces, led by Tariq Saleh, who is the nephew of Ali Abdullah Saleh. This means it is an area controlled by members of the former regime in Yemen, and this area and the forces present there are also supported by the United Arab Emirates. So it is also an area of Emirati influence. And its main point of strength is this historic port Mocha. This port is now controlled by the United Arab Emirates. So now, before we explain the reason behind this conflict that has started between Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, we need to clarify a very important point as well. What we have discussed through these maps is not everything. The situation in the south, Yemen, in this area marked in yellow, all of it. There are dozens of armed groups, hundreds or even thousands of tribes. These tribes also have their own forces, as do these groups and these Yemeni tribes. They don't just join hands with the United Arab Emirates or Saudi Arabia, just like that without anything in return. They don't join hands with Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates for ideological reasons or anything like that. No, not at all. They follow whoever pays more, they follow whoever pays the monthly salaries, whoever offers promises, more weapons, and so on, whatever privileges. What matters to them is who pays more. So what happened recently and caused the situation to flare up in this region, in Hadramaut, in Al-Mahra, and in parts of Shabwa, is that Saudi Arabia took steps to try to turn the tables on the United Arab Emirates in this area. Saudi Arabia entered this region using soft power. They wanted to build soft influence for themselves in this area by supporting local forces and by winning over tribal sheikhs, by offering services and projects to residents who are very poor and suffer from poverty. And the one goal that Saudi Arabia has is to prevent separation. Because if this region separates, the internationally recognized Yemeni state today will become a landlocked country. Without any sea access, the Houthis have access, meaning they will always be strong. The south has access, while the areas under Saudi influence have no sea access. That's first. Second is the separation of the south. This will make Saudi Arabia face the Houthis alone in the future, meaning it will make it an easy target for the Houthis. Because all these vast areas in Yemen with their ports, population, forces and so on will become an independent state that has nothing to do with what happens in the northern part. The internationally recognized Yemen will remain alone in facing the Houthis. At any moment it might be exposed to their attacks. For example, it could lead to the annexation of the oil fields in Marib, and thus Yemen would lose everything. At that point, Iran would have a long border with Saudi Arabia. So, in order for Saudi Arabia to avoid this dangerous scenario for itself, it penetrated the southern region using soft power by providing support, winning over tribal leaders, offering projects and so on. Naturally, this upset the Emirates. They saw through the game. It sensed a major threat to its influence here, especially in Aden. Why do I mention Aden? Especially? Because if Saudi Arabia gains influence over these tribes, it will definitely take the city of Aden tomorrow. And the Saudi goal is clear: to prevent separation, and taking the port of Aden means having a sea outlet, which means they would have a seaport in Yemen. And it's well known that the United Arab Emirates doesn't like symbolic influence. The United Arab Emirates likes control over ports, control over strategic coastlines and so on. So what did the United Arab Emirates do here? The United Arab Emirates moved the Southern Transitional Council forces to establish control over these areas, to prevent Saudi influence from expanding further, and it started pushing the Southern Transitional Council to take practical steps towards secession. So here too, Saudi Arabia did not remain silent. Saudi Arabia intervened and began conducting airstrikes against these forces. The Yemeni government also moved its military forces, known as the National Shield, toward the south, aiming to take over these areas that the Southern Transitional Council had fully controlled, including Aden, Hadramaut and Socotra. This means eliminating Emirati influence. Moreover, Saudi Arabia asked the United Arab Emirates to withdraw its forces from Yemen within the next 24 hours, and the joint defense agreement between the United Arab Emirates and the Yemeni government has been cancelled. Saudi Arabia bombed a shipment of weapons that arrived at the Mukalla port, claiming that the weapons were headed to the Southern Transitional Council forces. How did the United Arab Emirates respond? What did they say? They said that these weapons were headed to the Emirati forces, not to the Southern Transitional Council forces. There were clashes, a palace, and very decisive military moves. The war is now raging, and what's strange is that this war isn't just between the Yemeni parties. Not just between these Yemeni forces, but between Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. This war may have been raging throughout the past months and years, but it was silent, it was in a quiet way, like a war of influence, an intelligence war, a media war, but now it has become public and moved to the battlefield. It has become military and bloody, and no one knows how it might end. Will it just be a proxy war between Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, or will we see direct involvement of Saudi forces on the ground? Because the situation is very serious, the game has become decisive today. Saudi Arabia cannot accept the separation of southern Yemen, while the United Arab Emirates is pushing for this proposal. How will things turn out? Let us know in the comments how you think this conflict might end. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. Peace be upon you, and goodbye.